This next video is on handling, and if you do your research, there's articles written. It's written in books, different books. Uh, Giving examples of handling, and there's a lot of information out there. Everybody has their own way of doing it. Everybody has their own style. Everybody thinks they're the best, and you know. So what I'm gonna do with this video is just kind of uh, take you through something I did in the past, or the way I went about it in the past when I took a dog to a show. You know, First, you know, like I mentioned, everybody thinks they're the best. So when you were active back then, you didn't really get compliments, not to your face anyway. Somebody might say something, when they're speaking to other people, how they consider what type of handler or how good of a handler you were. But it's just that competitive nature of, you're not giving anything up. If you want to be on top, if you want to be number one, if you just have that competitive spirit, so you don't think anybody's better than you. That's just natural to feel that way. One time I did get a compliment from a friend of mine. He was showing some younger guys, giving examples how to handle, giving them some tips. And as he was talking to him, he had his head down explaining. He kind of pointed over to me and said, back in the day, he was a pretty good handler. That's that's about as good as it gets. That, to me, that was golden. To have that acknowledgement from a friend of mine who I considered one of the best and a good handler as well. You know, so uh, coming up to the day of the show, or the day of the show, I wanted my dog put up quiet, whether I was traveling some distance or whether it was at my house. I didn't mess with them, because to me, that anytime you bring them out and start weighing them a lot and doing this and that, it cuts into their peak. So they're put up and just left alone, basically. I knew a week before that I was going to make weight, and I never missed weight. And I could tell pretty much what their weight was going to be way beforehand, whether were going to be spot on weight, quarter pound under, half a pound under, whatever it was, few ounces, whatever it was. You get into that mode where you just understand your dog. You understand the weight loss process, the drying out process, and the peaking process, and you can tell pretty much what weight they're going to come in at. If you've done enough of them, you have that experience. So let's say you're going to the show, and you get there, you know, about 15 minutes before it's your turn. What I would do is take them out for their last empty out. Uh, I never had a problem with the dog emptying out either, because I generally kept them on time. Even if I was on a more than one card show, uh, and I had them on that clock, at least from that time of that clock, they were ready to empty out. But generally, about 15 minutes before it was my turn, I take them out, empty them out, put them up. Handlers are going to get together, and you should do this before you do anything. Choose your referee. You want to choose someone who's fair. You want to choose someone you trust, someone who's impartial, someone who knows the rules. And you talk about those rules. If there are any discrepancies, if there are any changes in rules, which could be, the time it takes to make a scratch, anywhere from 10, 15, 20 seconds. Generally, it was 10 seconds. You talk about the out of holds, and you talk about, generally you would flip a coin to choose who's going to wash first, and the way we did it is you flip a coin, whoever won that, they chose where they were going to wash first, but the other guy got to choose what corner he wanted. If I was at my house, if the guy wanted to wash second, he wanted his corner, just so that I wasn't biased, or people didn't think whatever, I would let them do that. If they wanted to wash first, which generally you prefer to wash second. That way the other dog's in there, uh, and you know he's waiting on you. An experienced dog, all it does is get them a little worked up, get them anticipating. Some guys like that. Some want to wash first, especially if they have a more calmer dog. It gets them into the spot. They become familiar with the surroundings, see who's there. But most of the time, you would want to wash second. So you come in, you're ready to go. But you talk about all that beforehand with the referee. And once you do that, you weigh the dogs. Both dogs should be weighed beforehand, before you ever wash or step in there. I've seen guys where one guy washes, he's overweight, he's ready to pay the forfeit, and he goes and they allow him time to try and pull that weight off, this and that. No. Even if you're overweight, you want to make sure the other guy's on weight, because if he's overweight too, it's a wash. If you're overweight and he's on weight, you're going to pay the forfeit. And then you're going to decide whether both side, your opponent's going to decide whether he wants to still continue on or not. If they both make weight, it's set. Generally, the referee would hold the amount in his pocket, So you weighed both dogs. Let's say they make weight. You're good to go. You take them, wash them, you get in there. The referee, you have a second, and your second, and this is the way the rules read. When you do that wash, you provide towels to your opponent. Your towels go to your opponent. His towels go to you. Just so there's not any funny business on the towel. You can taste the dog at the wash. There's different ways to wash. Some people use soap and milk. Some use Everclear. Some want to use betadine. It just depends on what you agree on. That should all be hashed out beforehand, before you ever step in that box. So you made weight, you wash, go to your corners. Your second is going to stay with your opponent. That's the way it should be. So you can watch him, make sure there's no funny business. Same with your opponent. His second's going to be with you. You go to your corners. Sometimes you want your second in the other corner. Make sure they don't do no funny business. Sometimes you want your second in your corner to give you advice. And in that case, I preferred having my second in their corner. And if I had someone else there, then they would be on my side. But irregardless, when I was in there, I could hear the people I needed to hear. I didn't have to take my attention away from my dog. I didn't have to look at him. I didn't have to, even the referee when he's giving instructions or whatever. I see a lot of people, or I saw a lot of people, they want to talk to this guy and that guy, and they call him and they look over at him and all. You don't need to do all that. Your focus should be on your dog at all times. So you get to your corner. Again, he'll say, the referee will say, face your dogs, right? The second he says that, I'm putting my dog facing him up. I'm making sure he's standing on all fours. I got my hands on each side of his neck, on the skin, holding him down, holding him. They can get rambunctious. So you're trying to hold them as still as you can, but you want them 4 feet, especially the front feet, planted if you can. You can't lift them up and drop them and let them scratch. You can't push them. You can't kick them from behind. You can't do a lot of sneaky shit that people used to do. You can't cover your dog. You can't lean over them. That's why that rule is in there. Fair play must be observed at all time. Fair play must be observed at all times. Okay? And the referee is the one who's to make sure that takes place. Another one is no dog can have an unfair advantage over the other dog. That's why rubs aren't allowed. That's why spinning teeth isn't allowed. That's why those cheating tactics aren't allowed. That's why there's a particular weight. That's why there's a particular time generally. Right? All that has to be covered, and all that has to be watched by the referee. And the referee himself, he shouldn't be taking his eyes off the dogs and the handlers either. I've seen them go over and talk. Again, they want to talk and laugh and pat each other on the back and all this stuff. I've seen people hand drinks and stuff to the handlers, and that none of that's supposed to be allowed. You cannot touch your dog unless the referee instructs you to. You cannot take an outside drink from somebody, or a cigarette, or weed, or whatever the fuck people do, you know, that you see all this stuff happening, you know. It's supposed to be hands off until a turn or out of hold has been called, and any of that outside funny business, shouldn't be allowed. So you face the dogs up. I got them squared up. Referee says release your dogs. It's the second he says release, I'm letting them go. That's it. And that's fair. And you can do that. So you cut them loose. Generally, what I would like to do is I allow them to do their thing in the beginning because it's hot and heavy, it's fast, it's a fast pace. I don't want to block them. I don't want to keep them from doing what they want to do. They need room, they need space. Some people don't do that. They want to be right on top of them. Some people talk to them constantly. Some people holler and scream. Some people talk to them quiet, right? I like to talk to my dog when it was necessary, and if it wasn't necessary, I didn't talk to my dog. I try and stay in position where my dog can see me or hear me or smell me. And you can get real close to them, and you learn to be quick where they're not bumping into you, right? You can't block the dogs off. The handler can't pull any funny business like that. They have to have room to move around. Some people like to do slick maneuvers. Generally, it doesn't help your dog in the beginning when you're doing that, when you're crowding them or hollering at them. If you schooled or conditioned or trained your dog to be that way, where you're constantly talking to them, then that's the way you did it. That's fine. If that helps, if it works. But dogs are smart. When they're doing good and you encourage them, they understand that. They love it. When they're not doing good and you're encouraging them, that's dumb. Okay? And I've seen guys talk to their dogs like as if they were a person. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not so good. When you start saying, what's wrong with you and how come you're doing that, and looking up at your corner and what's happening, what's going on, and like that doesn't help. A lot of times as I'm moving in the opposite direction that the dogs are moving. And what that does is it places you at different points where you're facing your dog. And you don't have to do a lot of moving around and burn yourself out and jumping around and running. If you're walking after your dog or trying to keep up with your dog, then all you're doing is playing catch up. So if they're moving around, I would position myself where as they move around, I'm going the opposite way, which brings me to them. And it only takes a few steps. If they're crowded in a corner, and they get bunched up, I like to plant one foot so that I can pivot on the other foot if I have to move around. Sometimes I'm pivoting all the way around my opposing handler because the dogs are moving one direction or the other. So I'm pivoting around, so I'm going to be where they're at. We're going to meet up at the same time, right? So it's just little things like that. And generally, I like to go with the flow of the match. However it was going, that's how I dictated what I was going to do. I didn't have a set pattern. I didn't do the same things over and over and over. It all depends on how it's going. If a dog's a good wrestler and he likes to move around, he's defensive, whatever, I like to give him the space. Let him do their thing. Dogs are keen to you, especially if you've conditioned that dog. They know where you're at. They can sense where you're at. They can smell where you're at. They can see where you're at. And if the match gets down to the nitty-gritty and it gets tight, they can hear you. They can smell you. They can see you. Sometimes they're blinded by blood. Sometimes they're blinded. Sometimes they're tired and in shock. Sometimes they're fatigued and frustrated, It's just a matter of knowing how to move, when to talk, when not to, when to encourage, when to send them in. Some people will send them in right away. If they have that type of dog that's just a pusher and a barnstormer and real active, high adrenaline, right? They send them in right away. They want them to get in there, do their damage, so when they slow down, the damage is done. Hopefully the opponent can come back from it. But if you don't have that type of dog, or your dog is not doing what he's supposed to do in that regard, you don't want to be sending them in all the time. Constantly, constantly, constantly. It gets their adrenaline up, gets their heart pumping. You're wasting them. So you have to pay attention to what's going on. You have to know how to maneuver. You have to know when to handle, when the actual handling starts. The referee will call an out of hole count if the dogs have stopped mouthing each other for a certain amount of time. In the past, it used to be up to 5 minutes, way in the past. And that's why you see these 2, 3, 4, 5-hour matches back in the 1800s and early 1900s. The rules dictated that. So if you have a 5-minute out of hold, 2-minute out of hold, they have to be out of hold that long before a handle can be made, right? Dogs will rest for that long and get back into it. That's what the difference with the Cajun rules. They shorten that up because, a lot of dogs don't survive. They felt it was unnecessary to push them in that way so that you have these long, drawn-out matches when you can just get the handling started quicker, and whoever's going to quit is going to quit, or whoever's not going to be able to scratch is not able to scratch. It's that simple. It was for the benefit of the dogs, for the mortality rate of the dogs to go down, for the survival rate to go up. That was the purpose of it, because a lot of those were held, and a lot of those conventions were held in Cajun country in the summertime. That's the quickest way to lose dogs from shock, from being overheated, or stressed in that manner. Sometimes it doesn't take too long, especially in the heat. So if the out of hole count is called, the referee will tell handlers to handle your dogs. The dog that was on the bottom is the one that scratched first. Then he makes a scratch, and then you scratch in turn. Again, way in the past, it wasn't that way. Way in the past, it was whoever turned, scratched, even after an out of hole count. And if the same dog kept turning, he had to keep scratching. That's why in some of those old reports, you'll see, this dog made 5 scratches, the other made 2. It wasn't scratch and turn. The other way to start handling is, a turn is called. So generally, if I was referee, I liked the handlers to call their turns or out of hole count, meaning they have to let me know that a turn has been made. They have to let me know to start the out of hole count. They have to let me know that their dog is fanged, right? It doesn't have to be that way. The referee can do all that on his own. But I just liked it that way because it was more fair play, right? It shows that not always, but a little bit, the referee being less biased, right? Because if there's a turn made and the handler calls a turn on his opponent, he's just advising the referee of what everybody is seeing. That's about as fair as you can get. Sometimes you have a sneaky referee and he calls his own shit and he's going to call whatever. That's why it's important to get the referee that you can both trust. One that, even if you don't know him, if he has a good reputation as being fair, you're probably going to be okay with him. If a turn has been called, then the dog that turned first has to complete the scratch first. Now, let's say a turn is called and they're out of hold. You can immediately pick them up then and go to your corners. Let's say a turn is called and they go right back into hold. That turn is still valid. So anytime after that they're out of hold, you can handle the dogs, go to your corners. So once that has happened, you go to your corner. And what I like to do is pick my dog up, and I like to be what I consider quick, but not jerky. Quick but smooth, basically. You get a habit of it just by handling more dogs. You don't want to jerk them around. You don't want to lift them up and swing them around. You don't want to grab them in the wrong spot. A lot of times people would grab them by the side of their, near their rib cage, pinch the skin. That fucks the dog up. They don't like that. I generally like to grab them by the scruff of the neck. If I'm going to use two hands, I'm picking them up with one hand in front of their chest, one hand underneath them, not on their belly, but on their brisket, and just smoothly lift them up. As I'm going back to the corner, I'm making sure that they're not fanged. I'm clearing their mouth, wiping stuff off. If there's blood or fluids or whatever, and I go immediately to my corner. It's kind of like in boxing when you hear the bell ring, ding, ding, boom, you should go to your corner. If you're near your corner, great. That just gives you more time to work on your dog when you're in the corner. If you're not, get there as quickly, as smoothly as you can. You have to face your dog in the corner. So as that's happening, and in most cases, but not all cases, especially if it's real cold, you have a bucket of water with 2 sponges in it, one for each handler. The referee, the bucket is supposed to be in a neutral corner, and the referee is supposed to distribute the sponges to each dog. The way I like to do it, I would throw 1 sponge to one guy, 1 sponge to the other guy, and hopefully I'll remember next time I'll throw the sponge to the other guy first, then this guy, just to make it as fair as possible. So you get the sponge. I like to get the sponge, put it over their back of their shoulders first. Then I like to wipe the areas that have the less hair, because if there's any wind, any air, sometimes there's a fan blowing, sometimes you're outside, that will cool down the dog first. If it gets to the point where, let's say you're outside and it's real cold, you may not want to use that sponge because it'll cool your dog down too much. So it's all a matter of, the situation that you got to read what's happening. You don't have to use that sponge. If it's hot, I would advise using it. I wouldn't pour water in the dog's mouth, squeeze it. I've seen people do that, squeeze water in their mouth. If you're overheated, if your dog's overheated, having them drink water doesn't cool them down. But wiping them down and wiping the mucus from their mouth or blood, make sure their nose is clear. Also, another thing I like to do, in the corner with my dog, I have them between my legs facing the corner. I kind of keep their mouth closed, if possible. Again, if it's blocked with fluid or blood or whatever, you don't want to do that. They have to breathe through their mouth to get as much oxygen as they can. But when you close their mouth like that, it forces them to breathe through their nose. And most athletes would tell you that's the best way to get the most effect from oxygen getting into your lungs, through your nose. You see a lot of, athletes, they breathe into their nose. It's better. Even now when I do my little bullshit walk or exercise out there, just because I've been doing that so long, I walk or run or trot or whatever with my mouth closed. It's just whatever the physics are, the oxygen gets directly into your lungs quicker when you do that. So I would, if possible, keep my dog's mouth closed with one hand while I'm rubbing them down and wiping them down with my other hand, so that they're forced to breathe through their nose to get that oxygen in. That's just a little tip. It's 30 seconds in the corner, 25 facing in the corner. Then the referee says, face your dogs. He'll count off 5 seconds, and whoever's turn it is to scratch has to make that scratch in the allotted time. Again, when he says face your dogs, smooth but quick, I turn them, and I make sure their front feet especially are planted. I've seen a lot of guys, they face them, the dog, and they got the dog faced up, but the foot's crooked, it's folded underneath, or they got one going this way, one going that way. It's important that they have a firm start. So I always made sure, even let's say the referee's talking to me, I can work on my dog. I can face my dog up and square him up if I'm looking at the ref, if he's giving me some kind of instruction. You just get it in your mind. You know where the dog's at. You know how his body is. So it doesn't matter. I can even look at the ref as I'm facing my dog off and watch him count. Because when he says 5, release your dog, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, release your dog, I'm cutting him loose. But I got to make sure he's planted. If he's not, he's going to stumble over. He could fall down depending on if he's hurt or fatigued. So all those things are important. You want to square them up, face them off. I've seen people on the release, they hold the dog by the scruff of the neck. In another country, they do that a lot. That's common. One hand, the dog's out front, which is fine, but they got one hand on the back of the neck, on the scruff of the neck of the dog. He's pulling forward, and what that has a tendency to do is make their eyes water. So now their eyes aren't clear. I always have on the side of the neck, holding the skin, holding them up, facing them forward. Make sure they're looking in that direction. Dogs can get disoriented. If you ain't holding them with their head facing their opponent, sometimes they'll look to the left, look to the right. They'll scratch this way, that way. It happened to one of my dogs. A friend of mine was handling because he didn't square him up. He didn't face him up. So he made it to the dog, but he didn't go in the right direction at first. So it's just little things like that. You're shooting a gun, you're shooting a bullet, point straight. When he says release your dog, if it's your turn to scratch, you immediately release your dog. You can't touch him after that. You can step around him, you can step back, you can stay in that position, but you cannot touch your dog again after you've released him. Hopefully your dog will make the scratch. And then it continues on like that, and you want to position yourself in the best possible way to help your dog do what he's going to do. And you want to speak to him at the right time. You want to send him in or back off. He may need soft voice. He may need hand clapping and encouraging. And that's why I've stressed in the past that my dogs were used to bright lights and a lot of people and loud noises, because sometimes there's loud noises and hand clapping, or the opponent can they'll blow on their dog or wave their t-shirt at them. It can be distracting, but none of that stuff ever distracted my dogs. They can take their hat off and wave it. If it bothers the opponent, you can bring that to the referee's attention, and he has to tell the opponent to stop doing that. If it doesn't bother the opponent, there's really not much you can do about it. And again, I didn't care. It helped my dog too. They want to wave their t-shirt. They're giving my dog air too, So I didn't care. But none of that ever distracted my dogs, and it can. And that's why, like I said, I've stressed, get your dogs used to everything. If I had my kids in there when I was schooling them and they're pulling their tails and picking up their lips and pulling their ears and pushing them, and my dog could stay focused doing what he's doing without hurting my kids, without turning on my kids and biting them or me, then somebody hooping and hollering and making noise or waving their hat around, it's not going to bother them. It doesn't do anything to them. They're focused on what they're doing. So as you get more and more into it, and the handles start, again, you want to be quick, but you have to be smooth. No jerking them around, no jerking them up. So I've seen people pull them by their tail. There, you could break a backbone, I think, doing that. They'll grab them by the side, pinch that skin. The dog reacts to it. Not good. I always try to get them by the scruff of their neck. Now, anytime the dogs are out of hole, they're supposed to be handled. Some people will bullshit around and pretend they missed a handle or not handle, or say, fuck it, I don't have to handle the dog. Yes, you do. And some referees won't enforce that. That's where the handling comes in. I could handle if the dogs were standing up, laying down, side by side, turned around, whatever it was. And you practice doing that. You can snatch them up while your dog is on the bottom and the other one's on the top. And the way I like to think of it was, there's a point when they're going to let go, right? They're going to come out of hole. They're going to open their mouth. I tried to time it so that as they're doing that, I'm already reaching down to grab them. So the second or nanosecond that their mouth comes open, I'm snatching them up. Because if you're too late, or if you're not quick enough, when you go to handle them, the dog will bite the other dog again. He'll go back into hole, even though he was out of hole. It's just that reaction. So again, you have to be quick, you have to be smooth. I've seen a lot of good handlers that know that and know how to do that and practice it. And I've seen a lot of people that really don't know how to handle. They don't position themselves properly. And they don't handle when they should, when it's their turn, or when they think they should. Uh, and a lot of that is just experience, knowing when to handle, when to back off a little bit, allow your dog the space, send them in when they need it. I used to practice handling right-handed and left-handed from different positions, whether the dog's laying down, whether I'm on his right side or I'm on his left side, front, back, all that. Because it can come down to the handling. It can come down when is the right moment to do it. And you'll hear people say, you need to handle. Make your handle. Because your second being on the outside can see things that you don't. And sometimes it's imperative to do it at that time. It could be they see signs of the opponent going to quit. Sometimes those signs are real. If you handle it the right time, they're going to quit. But if you don't and it keeps going, they get back into it. And then they're not going to quit until later, or not at all. Or maybe yours will first. Or maybe you'll have to pick up. And that's the other thing. If I saw I wasn't going to win, I would pick my dog up. Courtesy scratch him, whatever. But I didn't leave it there in the hopes that the opponent would walk away. Unless he showed signs of doing that, or unless he showed signs of quitting on top, or that he was getting too tired or going into shock, I've just picked my dog up. But if it's close, it's tight, I'm going to let it play out. You always think, and you always should think, that you're going to win. Never get it in your head that you lost, because when you handle your dog, he's going to feel that. You're going to transfer that energy. He might feel that way too. So you always want to have that in your mind. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. We're going to win. And that's it. Once you've decided to pick up, bring it to the attention of the referee. And anything that you decide, whether it's a turn, out of hole, defang, whatever, always bring it to the attention of the referee. I don't care if your opponent, you're standing off to the side and he shakes your hand, says, I give it up. Make sure the referee hears it too. Bring it to the attention of the referee. Because if he tells you that and you go handle your dog, that's a foul. The referee has to declare it. I think everybody knows what being fanged is. And what it looks like kind of is like this, like that on the side, top lip, because the bottom lip is hung up. The top tooth of the dog is hung up on the top, on his own top lip. Sometimes it protrudes through the lip. You can see it. You bring that to the attention of the referee. But you always watching for fangs. They generally happen in almost every match I've seen. Sometimes not, especially on the shorter ones. Sometimes it's because the lips start getting swollen and they get it's easier for the tooth to get hung up. But whatever it is, if you see your dog fang, you bring it to the attention of the referee. He can unfang them as they're in hold. If he can't, he has to separate them. And some people, during the rules, they say, we don't want you to unfang them in hold. We want them separated every time. The referee has to do that if both sides agree to that. If not, he can try and unfang them when they're in hold. If he can't, you have to separate them. When you break the dogs off, each handler handles his own dog. You have to separate them, face them away from each other 2 feet apart. Once the referee defangs the dog, he'll say, face your dogs. You face them up, that 2 feet apart. And he'll say release. You let them go at the same time, and it continues. And it just goes on and on like that. Sometimes there's no handling that needs to be done. It's over quick, one-sided, or it's even, and then one takes over, no handles being made, they just call the fight. He's picking up his dog. But there's times where you have to handle a lot. I think the most times I handled one of my dogs in a match was 13 times. 13 handles for each dog. Or 13 for me, and 14 for my opponent. Or however the number played out, because he ended up quitting. But I know it was 13 handles for me. So sometimes you have to do that. And you have to, it's a war of attrition sometimes. It's a dogged determination. You're moving around. I've been in freezing weather where I'm sweating like a hog just because of that adrenaline. You're moving around so much. You got to be up and down. You have to be able to move with your dog. On your knees, laying down, pop up real quick, put yourself in position. So, I probably missed some stuff, and other people have their own way of doing it. And, you know, some will disagree and don't disagree. And like I said, everybody thinks they're the best, and well, they should. I felt that way for damn sure. So, my point is, if there's any comments you want to add or something you don't agree with, always feel free to comment. It's an open book that way. I don't insult people. If I disagree with them, that's one thing, but I don't insult them in doing it. And I expect that in my chats, in my videos, in comments on my group, online, whatever it is. Because we're here to learn, we're here to teach, we're here to share history and information. All this stuff is the past. I'm not promoting anything illegal. All the same bullshit, which is real bullshit, that I talk about. That I'm grateful for the members and subscribers, all that stuff, all the super thanks and cash apps and all that. It's really appreciated. It gives me incentive to just keep doing more and more. And we're a community. Everybody should be able to get involved, even though we don't agree. So that's a little bit on handling. There's other stuff. I could make another one, 10 of them, and it would never cover everything. But hope you enjoyed it, and thanks.